Some of this we will include in the panel discussion later on, which will now be more or less opened with a keynote by Kristof Tomej. We spoke about the impact of mobility, especially aviation, yesterday already, that it has a huge impact on climate change. And Kristof Tomej from the University of Southern Denmark will now give us examples of innovative ideas and projects from Scandinavia. And he will talk about the impact of mobility and green destination. A very warm welcome to you, Kristof Tomej.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for the invitation to open this discussion on a very important topic of green mobility and tourism. And it's an important topic because we've been bringing this up multiple times yesterday, but also already today in this event. And I'm afraid I won't be able to provide a definitive solution to the problem, but in this very short presentation, I will try to offer some fresh perspectives on the issue, and then I'm looking forward to an interesting panel discussion afterwards. Mobility and transport are not exactly the same thing. The reason why we talk about mobility in the context of the green transition and sustainability is because much of tourism mobility is done through transport. And although there are variations in estimation and there's different definitions of what tourism is and what tourism isn't, but there's a general consensus that transport is the most energy-intensive component of tourism, and hence it's also the one that brings most of emissions, mostly CO2, but also other emissions. And if I show you in this context these three pictures, these three illustrations, you would think that this is because these are the main producers of those emissions. And that would be correct if we look at these tables, for example, showing the different amounts of emissions in tourism, where road transport, air transport, and to some extent also rail transport are the biggest categories, as we can see in percentages there. But I could also use these illustrations to represent the key milestones in tourism, modern tourism's development, because it were the steam trains back in the 19th century that allowed Thomas Cook to start offering organized tours. It were the first affordable automobiles in the beginning of the 20th century that allowed middle classes to take road trips, which then enabled the opening of hotels and motels all across the world. And then, if not the jet planes, which were introduced back in the 1950s, we wouldn't be able to invite guests from faraway destinations, faraway places like China or Japan or South America, Africa, and the millions of tourists wouldn't be able to enjoy the Mediterranean sun every summer. And even though there has been lots of technological developments in the last century, modern tourism is still very much dependent and enabled by these three modes of transport. So we're still very much living in a world which was designed back in the 19th century with those first steam trains. And that, of course, puts us, those who work with tourism, into a quite uncomfortable situation. Because could it be that the most sustainable tourism is no tourism at all? And we actually were witnesses of a natural experiment that took place just a few years ago. Because in 2020, the COVID pandemic, it stopped, to much extent, international tourism, but also domestic tourism, quite a lot. And as we can look at this graph of CO2, global CO2 emissions, you'll have to see that there's a little dip here in 2020 when they fell by 5.2%, so about 5%. And by the way, that dip disappears right away the next year, 2021, it goes back on to growth. And of course, I understand that that wasn't a complete stop to tourism, and it wasn't, tourism only one of the myriad of sources of emissions across the world. But I thought it's quite scary to see that even with all the pain that came with tourism stopping in the world, we only have 5% decrease. That's really far away from those 70% we're expecting in 7 years, at least here in Europe. So I think, again, if we combine these two things, we can see that perhaps it's not so simple as we simply just have to stop traveling. Perhaps the issue is a bit more nuanced, which is both disappointing to some extent, but I think also gives some hope. And I hope that will be also, you could see that from my presentation as well. So then the question is, how can we make mobility, tourism mobility more greener? And that usually revolves around the discourse of how can we convince tourists to take more environmentally friendly modes of transport. If we review the hundreds of papers, studies, projects, and initiatives on this topic, we'll find that pretty much all of them are dealing with some of the following. A variation of a carrot and stick approach, where we try to combine measures to reward tourists for choosing environmentally friendly modes, green modes of transport, and punishing them for using the less friendly ones. There's also a general assumption If only we could make public transport or other green modes of transport quicker, cheaper, and more comfortable, then by default the tourists will switch to those green modes. And then a few years ago, there was also this big deal about nudging, which became very popular, and that was also seemed to be like a solution to all the problems. It was exactly nudging which really inspired me as well a couple of years ago to develop a little small research project when I was on a research stay at the University of Pannonia in Hungary, not so far away from here in Vienna. And the idea was I developed a special questionnaire tool which I was supposed to use for surveying tourists on the street at a major destination in Hungary. And then my intention was to capture this decision process that tourists go through, their emotions, their thoughts, when they choose the mode of transport and mobility. And then I wanted to find that critical key moment when would be the right point to nudge them to the right choice and the right decision. Very soon enough, I realized that something was going wrong. There wasn't happening any decision when I was interviewing the tourists. It seemed to be like there wasn't any critical moment. And I thought at that point that was probably because my method was wrong, because my questionnaire was poorly designed. So I abandoned that project. But a couple of years later, I realized that perhaps it were my assumptions that were wrong, and not so much the method. And that is something, but could it be that transport choices that we are making are not so much choices that we really evaluate and assess all kinds of options, but that they're actually integrated into our identities, into our personalities, into our societies, into our social fabric, much more than we think. In any case, that's the idea you get if you look beyond studies on transport and mobility in psychology or consumer studies, but go into, for example, history and literary studies. For example, in books like Wolfgang Schiebel's books, The Railway Journey, and Elisa Friedman's Tokyo in Transit, show us how transport choices are not so much a choice, but in fact they are being shaped or preconditioned by much deeper societal, cultural, economic forces that shape our options and access to various modes of transportation. And if we go through those kind of sources, those kind of literatures, we'll find that, in fact, our transport choices are intertwined with our perceptions of time, perceptions of space, and perceptions of social relations. This is very different from price of a ticket, or journey duration, or carbon footprint of our trip, or whether we have enough space for our luggage, right? I'm not saying those are not relevant, but those are probably just the tip of the iceberg, with some much deeper forces making those, shaping those decisions. For example, cycling in Denmark. You all know that Denmark is really associated with cycling. Why cycling has become so popular there? If you ask ChatGPT, artificial intelligence, it will tell you it's because Denmark is a predominantly flat country, also because Danes are very egalitarian, and they have strong environmental attitudes. I can assure you that these would not be the reasons why a person who comes to Denmark now, either a tourist or an expat, would choose a bike. The reason why we choose a bike to move around would because, well, that's simply what they see. Because there are bike lanes everywhere, there are bike shops everywhere, there are hundreds of local Danes cycling. So it's part of the Danish culture. And it just makes sense to cycle in Denmark. And I would even argue that for most of Danes today, it's not so much that because of environmentalism or because of egalitarianism that they actually choose the bike. It's actually by biking, they're reinforcing their egalitarianism and also their environmental attitudes. I have another example. Maybe some of you have watched the HBO series The White Lotus. It's a very popular award-winning series about wealthy American tourists staying on a vacation at a fictitious resort chain called The White Lotus. And I think one interesting notion there is that both seasons of this very popular TV show start by the group of incoming guests, all wealthy Americans staying at the most expensive suites of the resort, arriving together by boat from the airport. And I tried to find the transcript from the season 1, episode 1, where Armand, who's the resort manager, says, "Mr. and Mrs. Mosbacher, hello, welcome to the White Lotus. How was your journey here?" And then Nicole, one of the guests, one of the wealthy guests, says, "Long, but honestly fine, happy to be here." To which Armand responds, "The boat ride does add time to the trip, but the views of the coastline are magnificent, aren't they? Simply a must for our VIPs staying in the suites." And in these last two sentences, we can see this intertwinement between perception of space, perception of time, and perception of social relations. Nicole is not choosing, or those tourists are not choosing the boat from the airport because it's quicker. It's definitely not. Neither it's more comfortable, from what we can see in her response here about being long and it's okay. But they still choose it because it makes sense. It makes sense for the White Lotus experience. It's part of it. It's not necessarily a decision they made, but it was simply part of the experience. So that example then suggests or brings me to the point that if transport and mobility choices are not so much a deliberate decision, then perhaps integrating it together with a tourism product can be more effective because they are very much intertwined and very much interdependent on each other. So, for example, but again, if we want to integrate them, then it has to make sense. So, for example, in places where reindeer carriages are part of the culture, those reindeer carriages can become part of the last mile, for example, or other forms of transport for the tourist. I have another example from Denmark, from northern Jutland. There is a little company called tour operator called Oh So Quiet, and they're offering hiking routes where they connect summer houses where the hikers can then stay overnight and rest. And so we can see here the mobility, the walking, and it's also an environmental friendly mode of transport, obviously, is an integral part of the tourism offering here. I have to point out, though, that by saying that we want to integrate mobility and tourism, I don't mean creating new products that are, the theme is something about mobility, something about walking, but rather integrating mobility into existing tourism products or aligning them. And because, of course, there's a huge diversity among tourists, there's the diversity in how we perceive time, how we perceive space, how we perceive social relations, it might also mean that we want to reconsider our target customer groups, because obviously if we start putting them together, our tourism offering and mobility, they have to be aligning. So we can't just offer something which then in our destination, which then doesn't align with those perceptions of time, space, and social relations on the leg of the mobility, on the mobility leg of the experience. And finally, but I think the most important point that I want to make is that I think we came to a point where we really have to reflect on whether tourism mobility in a specific context is actually worth it. We have to ask ourselves this deep question, whether the tourism that we're involved with, who benefits from it? And if the answer is it's only the tourist and the tourism business, then something perhaps has to change. If we consider it in a form of accounting, then let's consider that the costs to the planet, to the environment that come with tourism mobility should be then outweighed by the benefits, by the creation of new resources taking place, maybe at the destination or through the tourism process itself. And this is the key principle of regenerative tourism, which focuses specifically on positive contributions of tourism towards the larger living systems to which it is part. It is inspired by living systems, such as our human body or any body, or natural ecosystems. In our body, the different organs work together to maintain health, maintain life. In a natural ecosystem, different elements of it, like animals, plants, fungi, they work together to maintain habitability. So the question is, how can tourism work together with other elements of our society, in nature, to create a livable planet, a livable and happy planet for humans, for animals, and all other life there. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kristof. And you will stay with us here on stage because we will start the panel discussion now as planned. And for that, I kindly like to invite Robert Thaler on stage. He's head of Department Active Mobility and Mobility Management at the Federal Ministry for Climate Action. Then also Markus Brandstätter. He is tourism marketing from Hermagor, Carinthia. We met him already yesterday. Carina Krebs. She's from Felsenland, Südeifel tourism in Germany. We heard about the dinosaur park yesterday already in the very nice presentation from Germany. And Kristof Tomej is here with us anyways. Welcome here on stage, and let's talk about mobility and tourism. We'd like to take a closer look on mobility within the ETGG projects that you all are here for, and we want to focus on challenges, and we also want to have a look at best practice examples. And I'd like to start maybe with the broader view and start with Robert Thaler from the ministry. Of course, we heard what hotels and organizations can do for making mobility, sustainable mobility, more interesting for their guests. But that's not the only way how they can do it. They need a bigger view on it. So what activities does the climate ministry undertake to promote sustainable mobility in tourism in general?
First of all, welcome. Good morning, everybody. All tourists sitting here and relaxing. That's nice. You enjoyed Vienna hospitality, organic hospitality yesterday evening. So you are the experts, you are the problem, but you are also the solution. That's my message to you. You are either stakeholders providing tourist products, you are working in SMEs or in enterprises, but you are also tourists. And the issue which was I liked the presentation very much, because normally we think technology will save everything. So if we just switch the fuels, if we just switch to other automobiles, if you just make a new technology or make everything digital, so we don't need to travel at all, we just put a helmet on and we are everywhere. But this is only one side of the coin, and maybe this is also the problem of perception. The other side of the coin are we. You, me, everybody here in the room. Your behavior, your decisions, everything you do can solve the problem, can also make problems bigger. So we have always this kind of dualism when we talk about solutions in transport. Technology is one thing that's necessary. We need the best, cleanest technology. But we also need to ask ourselves, where do we come from? Where do we want to go? How do we live? How are the Aborigines live? How we as tourists live? So this is a little bit a very sophisticated story. Sustainable tourism mobility is an issue for us of big importance. Austria is a tourism destination. A big amount of the economy depends on that. A lot of rural areas are depending on that. So we tried a lot to convince the different stakeholders to talk to each other, because transport operators normally have a different language. Tourism operators, they don't think about mobility. People come anyway. And then you have different stakeholders making the frameworks, which also have different languages. So our purpose was, and we have different competencies. I come from the climate ministry, which we are responsible for transport, energy, environment, but tourism is in the economy ministry. So we tried always, and that's I think one of the big advantages in Austria, to combine the forces between the different players. Therefore, we established, for example, a tourism mobility platform. So where all the stakeholders come together, we arrange tourism mobility days. We have specified a specific funding program to support projects of tourism operators, of hotels, of companies for making their mobility greener. So there is a lot of going on, and we have achieved quite a lot of positive results in various areas, but there's still some kind of a patchwork. And that's why I think we need to bundle the forces and to get out of the silos of everybody and talk to each other and work together for providing those solutions which are necessary. And that means integrate all the things. If you are a tourist, a marketer, you have to integrate the sustainable mobility from the beginning, because the choices are not made when people are already arriving. The choices are made at home when they have dreams. I want to go somewhere and I have some days off. I want to do that. So you have to be there with your alternative solution. And this is, I think, also part of the problem, because public transport think about commuting, school, and they stop the buses when the tourists come on Sunday or on Saturday. So this is a classical gap we have.
But
and
marketing
I think we have to overcome. So the message is, get out of your silos, talk to each other, work together, and try to understand that's not only technology, but it's also us and our behavior to solve the problem.
You said that also people in the marketing departments should have visions about sustainable transport, but of course the infrastructure has to be there. Otherwise, the guests cannot arrive, and you can't promise things that you cannot fulfill. So maybe can you give examples, because you said you have to bundle forces, which is also important on an international level, of course. We heard from Michaela Reiterer yesterday from the boutique hotel Thaler, who gives discounts to guests that arrive with by train or by bike, 10% discount, but if they come by plane, there is a problem. So is there, like, on an international level, a cooperation, or let's say, are there any programs on an international level that you focus on?
Yes, there is, of course. You have seen a lot of EU programs going on. We have done a lot of EU projects ourselves also. I only mentioned two products we achieved. The Alpine Pearls, maybe you know. Alpine Pearls is a network of municipalities offering sustainable mobility solutions with specific criteria which they have to fulfill. That was one result of an EU project in 2006, and the latest one was Trans-Danube Pearls. It was a little bit a copy of this approach along the Danube, so destinations on the Danube, which specifically see a market chance also in this sustainable tourism mobility. So there is an important need for international cooperation, because tourism is international. And in Austria we have so many guests from abroad that we have always to think about how they come to Austria. And therefore we launched also on a pan-European scale an initiative which was launched 2021 and which is now working well. It's a partnership under the UN in the Transport, Health, Environment Pan-European Program, is specifically on sustainable tourism mobility. So if there are countries interested to be part of that, please approach me. The major focus is to find those gaps which are missing on a European level, on a national level, to support the destinations or the hotels which want to embark on a sustainable mobility way. Because there are several frameworks which are counteracting our objectives, still existing, if it's funding, if it's tax system, if it's infrastructure. And we have to overcome these barriers. We do our best from our level, but we are a federal country, so it's a lot of competence division between the local level, the regional level, and the federal level, so we have always to cooperate. So I invite you just to be more active in this international cooperation. That's very important. And the UN offer a new scale of pan-European approach, so it's not only EU, but of course we use a lot of EU funds and programs too.
I'd like to pass the word on to Markus Brandstätter, and let's take a closer look into the region. You are from the tourism destination Nassfeld, Lesachtal, Weißensee. 3 projects were certified yesterday here, and it's the most sustainable tourism region in Austria. So maybe can you give us some insight? What does it mean when it comes to mobility, and what are the challenges still?
Yeah, thank you. At first I have to say to you all, really congratulations for the whole presentations yesterday. You did really a great job in your region, and I think I know what you have done, because we did nearly the same thing. That's the sustainable tourism region, because that's not other things as to look for cooperations, to look what is in the region done, and bring it together. Our region, we had the good situation that Lake Weißensee had a great public mobility for the clients and also for the guests. We had a big skiing resort in the Nassfeld. We have a really good ski bus system there, whatever. But the really great challenge for a sustainable tourism region is, I think, 2 words: cooperation and cooperation. That's, I think, the main thing. And we had now the thing that we can work on about 10 different projects in these things. And so we are working on energy efficiency in hotels. We are working on renewable energy communities in our region. And next Wednesday we can present the first one of them. So the community of Hermagor, our biggest community, and about 10 private companies make such a new company and produce renewable energy and give it to each other. So it's the first one of Carinthia. We're working on waste prevention for hotels and for the locals. We are the first slow food travel region in the world, and so we got the chance from Slow Food International to make a new touristic product with slow food travel. I think we can talk about later about the details, and that's it. We're working on a house of sustainability online, and we're making now a new management product, a new management company to bring all the things in one company together. So all things to this, we're working on it. We will connect in one big company and with employees and so on who are working in the future on this system. One of the biggest thing is the whole mobility in our region, to bring them all together, and that's, I think, one of the most important thing we are thinking about it, and because we had in the past we had really great problems because our train service, the ÖBB, said us, I think it's 6 or 7 years ago, we will close the whole train in your valley. So everyone was afraid, what should we do, what can we do? But I think that's a typical answer from a small valley. Okay, the middle of the trains will be closed, we do the best. And so now we have for that 1 hour takt from Villach to Hermagor, and we got a new takt system from Hermagor to each valley. So at Geltal, Gitschtal, it's about 150 kilometers. We have now buses every hour, and that's for such a valley like us really great, because before we had a bus in the morning for some pupils, at midday and in the evening, and on Saturday, Sunday, you waited for buses. There was no bus, so that was the first step in the public transportation, and with this gap, we made more and more. So we had then a small trick, because we had to make new contracts with the ÖBB and so on. And this trick was every one of our guests with the guest card can use the whole public transportation for free. So it was the really first gap for the things. Since last year, all of our guests can also use the whole trains in Carinthia for free. You only need the guest card, can use them. But what I say to the public transfer, also for guests, the most important thing is to think at first about the locals. When the locals will use it, when the locals see that's a really good system, I can use it for go skiing, for hiking, for biking, whatever, they will use it. They will tell it to the guests, and then it's, I think, one solution to bring it together on a new thing.
That's what Kristof Tomej also said in his presentation, that the locals have to benefit from sustainable transport and mobility. So I understand that for the guests and the tourists, there is a guest card. They can use public transport for free, but I guess it's not for the locals. So how do you get the locals to use the sustainable transportation methods?
So for the locals, there are some of the buses also for free, so like the ski bus, whatever, in winter. And the ski bus is so that all public lines and the ski bus is all together, so the whole winter every one of our locals can use the public transfer. Also, as we have shown it in Austria, we have the new ticket for everyone, for every lines, and so I think that was a really good step for the future. And almost this summer we have also one card for employees, not only employees in tourism, employees of every company who wants to have it. And with this employee cards, also the public transfers are for free. So I think that's the way you can do it.
Maybe one last question. We heard from Mr. Thaler that he said digitalization is not the only thing we have to focus on, but of course we have to focus on because that's also the future. What kind of role does digitalization play in successful sustainable mobility in your region?
We think do good things and tell it to everyone. So we have the big problem, not so easy. We made the whole public transportation with local companies, small local companies, and they haven't access to Google Maps. They can't give the whole transportation to Google. It's not possible. So when when you look for public transportation in Google or at Scotty from ÖPB, you will come to Hermagor, and from Hermagor we have a real good system, but nobody knows it. And so that's our big problem. Only papers, whatever, is great. Yeah, we can give it to everyone, but I think everyone who wants to use the public transfers, they have to use it digitalizations in one system. We tried to make our own thing. It's really hard. It's very expensive, and then you have your own small thing, and nobody found it. So that's I think for us, for a small village, the biggest challenge that we have. Almost our biggest transfer service, but I say in Austria, the ÖPB can provide it, but they really knows what they want to have for it. So for a small tourism destination, you can't buy it.
So maybe here also one of the solutions could be cooperation and talking about it more, because just one example, I went to Villach in Carinthia and went with an electric car, and I saw it on the map that there should be a charging station, but nobody knew where it was. Not even the officials from the museum knew it, even though it said it's right there. So
we are on a good way, but we are not ready. You can see it there.
There's a lot to do still. Let's move on to Germany, to Felsenland Südeifel tourism, to Carina Krebs. You're a project participant. We saw the presentation yesterday, and maybe you could tell us a little bit about your experiences with the project, especially in the region, and what the challenges are when it comes to guest mobility.
Yes, I'm happy to be here. First of all, I have to apologize because my English is not that well, but I try my best to make you understand me. So participating in this project is a great enrichment for us. We consider this project, European Tourism Going Green, as an entry into the development of a sustainable vacation region. Through this project we have learned a lot about certificates, criteria, and sustainable operating concepts. And this is elementary for us in order to be able to convince other tourism businesses to be a part of the change. And first SMEs that have heard about our project have concrete interests in becoming sustainably certified in the future. So it's for us, it's a start in getting more sustainable in our region. And we have 3 SMEs which are certified now. It's the Irrela Mühle, that's apartments which are offered. We have the dinosaur park and a campsite, Südeifel. And these 3 are our nucleus to start in a better tourism region than we have. The second question was about mobility. So mobility is the lifeblood of tourism, and so it's important that we be a part of the change, the green change If a region is easily accessible by public transport, the attractiveness of this region improves, and especially for short holiday trips. So it's really important, but we have to be honest, in rural areas like ours, we have traditionally relied on private transport, so that's a big problem.
So what Mr. Brandstätter told about Carinthia, that they tried to make new movements in public transport, what is it like in your region at the moment?
Yeah, we are on the border to Luxembourg, so we have a best practice example directly in front of us, because in Luxembourg the public transport is completely for free for everybody, for residents and for tourists. And from my office there are only 50 meters just over the bridge, and we are in Luxembourg. And a lot of our guests uses this offer because we have cross-border hiking trails, and that's a really benefit for them to make a hiking trip and come back with the bus from Luxembourg. So yeah, but the real problem is for us, it's all about money. So it's really expensive. For example, in Luxembourg, the price per year for this opportunity to have public transport for free depends on 500 million euros every year. And to understand, our county has the size of 2/3 of the size of Luxembourg, so we can compare it. It might cost in our county 300 million euros to make the same, so it's not possible to do it for us. But we have also some ideas how we can handle it in tourism. One of this is cycling, go by bike. We have a lot of good cycling lanes, and that's something we would like to invest in the future, even from, for example, Irrel, a cycling path to Echternach, the oldest city in Luxembourg, where people can go by bus further, because Luxembourg city is one of the most important cities for us, for our people who live in our country. And so cycling is one of the solutions, but even public transport on demand is one of this, so that you can call for it 15 minutes earlier and then you can get a bus to use it. So you can close the gaps where you have no mobility because there's no school time, so that's a possibility. Another one is that transportation associations offers something for accommodations. They can buy it for their guests, that they can use it in the duration of their stay, the public transport for free. So it depends on the beds and the normal level of occupancy of their beds. So that's the price of this, and that's an offer which every accommodation can make for their guest.
Maybe let's go back to Carinthia. You mentioned the slow food travel destination, which your region is the only one or the first one in the world. You said you want to come back to that a little later, so maybe does that slow food destination also have an impact on sustainable travel? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, what is slow food travel? And what is the sustainability of it? Slow food travel means not other thing to bring guests and our locals together. Our locals, we have small farmers, we have small bakeries, whatever. and they do their job. They produce the whole meals and so on, like our grandmas did it. And we do not other things and bring guests, also locals, with these farmers, with these bakeries, whatever, together. They can learn from each other. They can come in contact with each other. So like yesterday, you've seen the Schlössl Lerchenhof. Schlössl Lerchenhof got the Eco label, and it's also one slow food travel partner. And you can learn there how to make the original Thaler Speck. It's a meat. You can learn it. You can see where the pigs are. You can see and feel what they are doing with the meals and how they will do it. They done it 100 years ago, and they will do it also in the future. And I think what we have seen, we will give many of our small farmers a future. So we had one proposal in a small village, a small farm with a typical in our region 5 cows, some sheep and some pigs, and they decided we want to make some sheep cheese for the future, and we will provide it also for slow food travel. We will show it how we will do it, whatever. So 5 years ago, the farm was with the old owner, and the young child. He's already 30. Decided, all right, this is my future. I will come back home. I will produce the cheese. I will show it to our guests, and I think that is also one thing to sustainable future of one region, that we can provide a future also not for SMEs and hotels, whatever, also provide a future for the farmers, a future for small other companies in our region. And we've seen we have about 3 or 4 tours every week for slow food travel. There you can learn how to make typical bread, cheese, and speck, whatever. And I think now we are after 4 years in this lucky situation that every one of these will booked. So we have on every day about 10, 12, 15 people who want to learn it, who want to enjoy the meals, who want to talk with our guys. And when we calculate it, so every one of them will cost per person about 40 euros. 10 persons or 5 persons. I think it's a nice income for a farmer, and so I think that's our way also for sustainable.
And hopefully they will then, after the nice meal, use the public transport.
Yeah, also we have, and that's the main thing. That's the main thing also with the public transports. We have a new product. We will show it next Saturday. So the green experiences. Not other things that we also almost looked what are really sustainable programs, guided programs, and what we forgot in the past. We had a guided program. The guided program starts at 10 to say something, and the public transfer arrived at 10:10. And so you have to think about on every small thing that you can provide the public transfer. You have to involve the farmers, you have to involve the hotels, the SMEs, to involve also us, to think about how we can do it.
Okay. Maybe we switch to long-distance travels as well. You said you don't really have the solutions, but you gave nice insights or nice ideas. And also yesterday from Stefan Gößling in his keynote, we heard that aviation is a really big problem when it comes to climate change. And he showed it with how many buckets of fuel are used for 1 hour flight and 9 hour flight. And if I understand it right, you said we have to reframe transport and mobility, and we have to see it also as a part of the holiday, like also think about the last mile, for example. But then on the other hand, especially before COVID, we saw the overbooked and really cheap budget airlines. How do we deal with that?
Well, I think that's the point of integrating the tourism offering and the mobility in it. Because if we look at our tourism offering and we see that the tourists, whether we're a destination or a hotel or an attraction, if the type of tourists we are attracting is actually the ones who will take those flights, then of course by offering this tourism product, we in a way contributing directly or indirectly to the same issue. So then we might want to reconsider what kind of tourism offering we do, and because we already consider how our tourists, our guests will be actually coming to us. So I think, I don't have a solution how to, to stop people taking those low-cost flights. I also, obviously, it's a complete industry of its own. But I think what actors can do is that they can integrate notions of mobility into the product development, considering who are we targeting, but also in communication. Because very often, lots of these nice initiatives about, that you can get 10% off perhaps from your hotel stay if you come with public transport, or if you come with public transport, we'll give you a Vienna card for 72 hours. Those are communicating at a later stage after the person already has booked the holiday. So they were not the consideration from the beginning. So I think, putting considering mobility from the beginning and aligning what we offer at our destination and our attraction with how tourists will come to us, and that I think that's how the tourism actors can actually adapt, or not adapt, but necessarily shape mobility patterns differently rather than just simply following on what those airlines are supplying to us.
So we have to create new opportunities, and also you said nicely, what we see is what we do. When we see Copenhagen and the bikes there, then people just copy it and just do it because that's normal there. Mr. Thaler, you wanted to say something?
Yes, on this question on long distance traveling, I think we have a little bit also learned from the past. We had a perfect night train network in Europe, and then it stopped in the late 90s, early millennium. Now we're reinventing this, and I must say Austria, thanks to our federal railways, we never stopped it. We bought all the other railway coaches from the other railways which stopped it. And now you can see the product of the night jets, which is suddenly, surprisingly, for all other railway companies now a challenge. And I must say, in tourism, the product should also sell the journey to the destinations. So that I think it's part of the holiday when you avoid traffic jams in the airport and all these security checks. You just jump into the night train in the center of the town and go to their destinations. We had a lot of skiing trains, of holiday trains, of summer trains from Copenhagen, from the Netherlands, from everywhere to Austria. They now come back. And I think, but for that we need a new quality also in train traveling. Still now we have all the old stuff, which is nicely refurbished, but it's old wagons. So we need also new products. But this is one example how you can easily switch, at least at the mid long distance destinations in Europe, from plane to train. But for that you need capacity, and this is the capacity. If I tried several times to go with night trains, they are overbooked because there is a big demand. And I must say this is one side of the coin. The other side, if you come by plane, you are a car-free tourist. And the thing is, the car is one of the integrated offer of this airplane tourism, because you have the rent-a-car everywhere. But you don't know about public transport, about other solutions. So please take the advantage if somebody from China, from Japan, from other continents come. It's a car-free tourism. You can easily pick him up or her up and offer a card like Switzerland is doing. I mean, I must say Switzerland, we are jealous about Switzerland, about the Swiss travel system, where the first thing you can buy is a public transport card everywhere for whole Switzerland. I often go to Geneva. The first thing I get there is a public transport for free in Geneva, very generous, from the hotel. And it's paid by of course, by the tourists because of the small amount of the extra charge. I mean, and I stop complaining about money. It's about the will to do something. Money is the second thing. If you have the political will, if you have the will to solve things, to make new things, the money will come. And if the clients or the customers are financing it by themselves with a little surplus charge on the overnight stay, you can offer a lot of things for free for the tourists, but don't forget the locals, it's very important, otherwise they will be jealous. And one last word I would say, we offer, of course, we had this booklet elaborated with our colleagues from the economy ministry, how a tourism destination can become a sustainable mobility destination. Because sometimes good ideas, but how to do it. And for that, I think, and we are very proud on Hermagor because it's also one of our projects we supported. And this, I think, we have now around 1,000 or 1,300 tourism operators, destinations which are running or which are supported by us. And this is some kind of a snowball effect. Yeah? And this is very important because you can learn from each other. And my personal experience, when I go to a hotel, but it's always the same story, I phoned, former times I phoned, now you do it on the internet. But the first thing was, yes, do you need a parking space? I mean, what's that? That's old-fashioned style. Or if you look at tourism internet pages or old-fashioned book or prospects or brochures, what you see, motorway signals. If you look how to come to the destination, the only thing you see, motorways. Also, it has to change because the first thing you have to offer, also as a hotel, and this is also very important, offer your guests another alternative solution to come to them. And this can be a night train, this can be a pickup service, this can be a demand-oriented bus systems. There's a lot of already there. There must be more and more of that. But you are the one who are directly in contact with the tourism. So you have to market also this alternative.
We unfortunately have to come to a closing, but Ms. Krebs, you wanted to say something.
Yes, I would like to add something because we can offer a lot of alternatives in public transport, but the main thing is that the people which use it have to change their mobility behavior. So it's all about changing something in your mind, and that's the biggest challenge. The example in Luxembourg shows us it's for public transport is for free, but it's not. It's still quite. It's still the car has a great. Has a huge position in Luxembourg, so it doesn't change that way they hope that it changed. We have to see it how it will goes in the next years because of the COVID pandemic. It's not so easy to evaluate if it's really a change in the behavior of the people. But we see now they use cars even if public transport is for free. So it's all about your mind to change it.
There's a lot to do still, and there are a lot of ways to start, which is good because then every region or every hotel or SME can start wherever it suits at the moment to make the bigger picture in the future. We all have sustainable mobility. That was it when it comes to transport and mobility. We will later on talk about green marketing and communication because as we heard here as well, it's really important to talk about the things and to transport them to the minds of the customers and the guests because there is no use in having new things and sustainable things but not using them. So educate, inspire and motivate, that's what it's all about when it comes to green marketing and communication.